At this point, I am going to introduce the chair of the 2026 World Environment Day Virtual Symposium, our very own Professor Patrick Paul Walsh. Before I bring him up, I'm going to tell you about his work and what he does. Thank you very much, Professor Patrick Paul Walsh, for being here today. Professor Walsh is the Vice President of Education and Director of the SDG Academy at the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. A full professor at University College Dublin, he holds a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics with academic and policy experience spanning Harvard, Columbia, and the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank. His work focuses on advancing sustainable development education through the integration of science, policy, and practice. And this we can attest to at the Green Institute because Professor Walsh has been very supportive of our initiatives and has really helped us from his advice to move some of our initiatives into practice and policy. So thank you, Professor Walsh, for honoring our invitation today.
As always, it's a joy to be here. Andalika, so congratulations on another symposium, another event. Always a big fan of all the work you're doing and very supportive. So I just want to just mention I'm a full-time academic, a professor in University College Dublin, working as a professor of global affairs and sustainable futures. But I have been on secondment to the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network in the capacity as Vice President for Education, and I'm Director of the SDG Academy. So just to say a little bit about SDSN first. SDSN, we set this up in 2012. So it's hard to imagine that this was the post-2015 process when we had the Rio +20 conference and the future we want. And here we are now coming up to 2027 when we're going to reimagine the post-2030 agenda. But at that time, Professor Jeffrey Sachs and Ban Ki-moon and Amina Mohammed, who's the Deputy Secretary General, felt that over the 3 years of consultation, there should be some legal and academic oversight. And that mandate was the birth of SDSN because Amina Mohammed and Sachs co-chaired that. And they created a synthesis report on the consultation process across governments and non-government entities, which fed into the 9 months of intergovernmental negotiations, which led to our 2030, which led to our transforming our world, the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So SDSN after that became more like a think tank, if you like, into the Secretary General's area. But one thing that happened was on education side that there was a feeling that even the UN system itself and the broader stakeholders were not really trained on sustainable development. Like they taught about social issues and economic issues, but maybe not integrated the environmental pillar. So as a result, with Ted Turner money, who died recently, unfortunately, and he was a big philanthropic, he founded the UN Foundation as well. We started these MOOCs, that we called them, on edX, these online courses. So at the time, it was Rockstrom's Planetary Boundaries and Sachs's Ages of Sustainable Development. Now we have about 60 to 70 of these courses. And just to say for this conference, there's a course on sustainable cities and a course on shaping urban futures, which is free and up on the SDG Academy. And I'll put them in the chat afterwards. And we actually have a professional cert on that. There's 3 courses on cities, sustainable cities and urban development, which you can take together and get an overall professional cert. So I'd say a lot of the talks that we'll have in this symposium will most likely put all of them out of date. So let's take that as prior learning. And then today's, the couple of days talking in detail about cities and the next agenda could actually be adding so much more because obviously we have emerging technologies like AI and other ideas that have emerged. But if you are interested to get an idea of what the Academy does, we do produce these free online courses that Creative Commons license. So even in our library, you can download them, repurpose them, translate them into different languages, good for putting up as a teaching resource on particular issues. Certain things have not changed. So it's worth having a look at. Okay, so leaving that aside, I just wanted to talk about the post-2030 process. So the Pact for the Future was the last outcome document that got consensus in the UN, particularly with the Trump administration. So as we went to the Finance for Sustainable Development Conference in Seville, as we went to the World Social Summit in Doha, they didn't even have an ambition really to produce a comprehensive outcome document to be signed by all nations. They more or less just summarized historical treaties and agreements. But what they did do is have a set of action initiatives, asking stakeholders led by government to get together and implement different actions so that we can speed things up and achieve what we can by 2030. What Pact Future also does is talk about UN reform and what sort of agencies are going to merge and how to make the UN more interoperable as an intergovernmental organization, say with the World Bank and IMF, or with other stakeholders like universities and so on. And that process is underway with UN 80 or UN 2.0 as well. Finally, though, it did say what's happening post 2030. And what's happening is they don't want to discuss it until the HLPF meets in the General Assembly, under the auspices of the General Assembly in 2027. So this is in a year's time. But there's already a lot of coalitions and people coming together. So, for example, you have the UN Global Sustainable Development Report, co-chaired by Phoebe Katoria of SDSN and others, who are actually doing the main science policy interface document, which they're already presenting at HLPF in July in 26, and it will be presented in September 27 as kind of the future of, say, academia and science in the post-2030 agenda or in the implementation to 2030. So in a sense, on your marks, get set, go, who will be ready in September 27? And of course, those interested in cities and urban futures and really believe in the local voluntary reviews and the importance of doing it at a local level, not necessarily national or regional or global, you have to be ready as well. There will be a point in which you'll want to argue that there should have been more emphasis on cities and the transformation of cities into inclusive and sustainable futures. And that is a challenge. I'm just going to give you one idea, maybe, and I know you're going to talk about lots of things. But for me, what's going to win and lose the day is it's going to be on what I call the follow-up and review process. And one of the important things for that will be indicators. And one of the things that, even from my history, I used to work on the Millennium Development Villages projects and things like extension health services in Africa and stuff. I was always very careful to try with kind of official demographic and health surveys to try and get a sense of a district, say, mortality rates for children or for women in birth and so on, maternal mortality rates. So when you did it, you could do a baseline of what it looked like in a district, did your intervention, and tried to see in your samples, did you improve things? But at least you had an indicator that you could link to the national indicator. And I think this is going to be a challenge for sustainable cities in the sense that what are the indicators or KPIs that you can construct, and how are they interoperable with the national level reporting or official databases? Because at the end of the day, if the UN mainstreams or tries to put more focus on urban development, it has to be capable of comparing it across cities, across countries, and across time. And what are the indicators that show that success? And to me, that's kind of problematic. I see wonderful, plans for cities in terms of infrastructure transformation and green spaces and dealing with heat, dealing with energy transitions, dealing with inclusive processes, working on access to education and health. Like, there's loads of wonderful SDG, let's say, planning. But how do you measure success in a city? What database are you feeding into? And how does that then, at a more decentralized level, feed into a regional or national approach with official data? Because I do think that you'll win the day in a post-2030 argument if you're capable of saying this is where the action will be, but you have to be able to show there's transparency and follow-up and review processes and indicators that can be official and verified and and interoperable, comparable across cities and across countries and so on. So I think I did see one of the themes will be about data. And maybe AI can be part of all that, and data centers, etc. But I actually think that this is one of the things I wanted to focus on. But with that, I'm an industrial economist, so I'm not an expert on urban development or planning or anything like that. But obviously topics of finance and governance and all of these. So I've noticed on the themes that will be discussed at this symposium that you are covering all of these issues. So that's exciting. And I wish you all the best. And I know it will be recorded and synthesized, and it will be read by people who are interested in promoting sustainable cities and urban futures in the next 2030 agenda, or indeed implementing as much as we can to 2030, or indeed coming up with very interesting innovations. So I'll leave it there, but I wish everyone the best in all your deliberations and conversations today and tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Professor Walsh, for that insightful opening remarks. And I think one of the most important points that you raise is that resilient cities cannot only be about beautiful plans or green spaces or infrastructure or even ambition. They also must be about measurement, evidence, accountability, and follow-up.
Yeah.
So from your opening remarks, I think that you've challenged us to think seriously about the indicators and the KPIs that can help cities show real progress, not only locally, but in ways that can connect with national reporting, global databases, and the post-2030 sustainability agenda. So as we begin today's collaboration, I believe is very powerful, is a very powerful frame, is that how do we move from urban vision to urban transformation. So thank you so much once again for setting such a thoughtful tone for the symposium. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. No, have a great day. Yeah.
Have a great day. Thanks, Professor White.